The void beyond the Martian freight lanes wasn't empty. It was a cemetery. The Odyssey was a grave robber, its hull a patchwork of rust and hurried welds, a stark blasphemy against the swirling, corpse-light nebula ahead. On the bridge, the air was thick with the smell of recycled air and human tension. Captain Eva Rostova's knuckles were white on the command chair's rests, her gaze locked on the viewport. This was the line. Once they crossed it, there was no coming back. Not officially. Final consensus buoy, Captain, her pilot Ben Carter announced, his voice tight. He was their geologist, their best shuttle pilot, and right now their navigator. On the Odyssey, everyone wore multiple hats, most of them frayed. Automated warning is insistent. A voice, smooth as polished ice and utterly devoid of life, filled the bridge. It was a recording, played on a loop for decades. Asterisk, by decree of the Galactic Consensus, System XT-77 is classified uninhabitable. Causal reality within the boundary is unstable. Gravitational, temporal, and psionic anomalies present. Abandon all transit. The consensus bears no responsibility for loss of life, sanity, or structural integrity. Asterisk. A snort came from the comms station. Kale, their prospector, shook his head, a grim smile on his face. Loss of sanity. Always with the drama. You'd think for a bunch of ultra-advanced beings, they'd have a better error message. They're not wrong, Kale, Eva said, her voice low. She'd read the reports, the few that existed. Ships that went and didn't come out. Those that did were empty. Hulls intact, crews gone from the neck up. This isn't a mining run. It's a suicide pact we all signed for a paycheck. A hell of a paycheck, Ben muttered, his hands dancing over the NAV console. Enough to pay off the ship, clear our debts, maybe even see a green sky again. Worth the risk. The consensus abandoned 89 systems like this, Kale added, leaning back and putting his boots up on the console. Wrote them off. Too messy. Too dangerous. Their loss. The ore density readings from the preliminary scans, it's insane. A fortune in hyperdense tritanium just floating there, waiting. Eva didn't answer. She watched the nebula, a great, glowing shroud of purple and green. It was beautiful. It was a warning. The galactic consensus, with their flawless ships and ordered minds, had drawn a line in the cosmic sand and said, this far, no further. Humanity, perpetually late to the party and desperate for scraps, had looked at that line and seen a starting block. They weren't here to conquer or explore. They were here to scavenge. Take us in, Ben. Nice and slow. Kale, get to your rig. I want to know the second you feel anything off. You'll be the first to know, Cap, Kale said, pushing himself out of his chair and heading for the door. His rig was a modified medbay cot wired into the ship's sensor suite. He wouldn't be reading numbers. He'd be feeling them. The transition was subtle. One moment, the stars were sharp, unwavering pinpricks. The next, they seemed to swim. A faint, oily shimmer distorted the blackness. The Odyssey creaked, a long, low moan of protesting metal that had nothing to do with pressure or temperature. Readings are going haywire, Ben reported, his voice strained. Gravity's fluctuating. Not much, but it's wrong. Like a tide that can't make up its mind. Eva gripped her chair tighter. Compensate. Manual override if you have to. The autopilot will get us killed in here. That's what killed the others, Ben agreed, his hands a blur on the controls. They trusted their computers. Their perfect, logical computers. He fought the ship, not with brute force, but with a series of small, instinctive corrections. He wasn't flying by the numbers. He was flying by the seat of his pants, feeling the ship's tremors through the controls and reacting. It was an art, not a science. A proximity alert blared, then cut off into static. What was that? Eva barked. Ben squinted at his screen, wiping away a trickle of sweat. Nothing. A sensor ghost. Or wait. He rerouted power, filtering out the anomalous energy signatures. The screen cleared, showing a cloud of debris. It's a graveyard. Gilthrak vessel, I think. Torn to shreds. Looks like it just came apart. They passed more of them. A Vex scout, its elegant hull punctured by something that left perfectly smooth, glassy edges. A Tarkellan freighter, twisted into a spiral. These were the ships of species far older, far more advanced than humanity. They had failed. The Odyssey, a rattletrapkin of a ship, kept going. Kale, report, Eva said into the comm. His voice came back, slightly distorted, as if he was speaking through water. It's loud in here, Cap. The static. It's not in my ears, it's in my head. A pressure. But I'm getting something. A stable point. A Lagrange point near the third planet's moon. It's quiet there. How can you tell? I can't. I just feel it. The noise drops off. It's the only patch of calm in this whole psychic storm. The others, they didn't look for the calm. They tried to power through the storm. That's why they're scrap. Ben plotted the course, his face a mask of skepticism. This goes against every navigational chart ever made. We're heading straight for a documented high anomaly zone. The charts were made by the ones who died here, Eva said, her decision made. Do it. The journey to Kale's quiet spot was the most terrifying 10 minutes of Eva's life. The ship shuddered, not from impacts, but from space itself seeming to twitch. At one point, the artificial gravity flipped 90 degrees for a full 3 seconds, slamming Eva against her harness and sending loose tools clattering across the wall. Ben cursed, fighting the controls, his face pale. It's like trying to sail on a sea of rubber. But Kale was right. As they approached the coordinates, the shuddering ceased. The starfield stabilized. They were in an eye of the hurricane. Orbital stability achieved, Ben breathed, slumping in his chair. He looked like he'd just run a marathon. Eva let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. They had done it. They had entered an uninhabitable system and found a safe harbor. It wasn't technology that had gotten them here. It was a man in a dark room, listening to a feeling. All right, she said, her voice regaining its command edge. We're in. Ben, prep the shuttle. We're going down to that moon. Kale, I want you to find me the motherlode. The biggest, richest vein of, or on this rock. Let's go be the grave robbers they think we are. As Ben began the pre-flight checks, Eva stared at the dead planet below. It wasn't a world. It was a tombstone. And they were about to start digging. The galactic consensus had written this place off because their logic couldn't conquer it. Humanity was about to profit because their intuition could simply navigate it. The real work and the real danger was just beginning. The planet was a wound in reality. From orbit, it was a mottled sphere of gray and sickly orange, but as Ben Carter guided the shuttle Canary through the thin, screaming atmosphere, the true madness unfolded. Mountains of jagged black rock twisted upwards, their peaks not pointing to the sky but curving inwards, as if trying to touch their own bases. A river of what looked like molten glass flowed upwards into a low-hanging cloud, where it shattered silently into a billion glittering fragments that never seemed to fall. The very light was wrong, casting 2 shadows from every rock, one sharp and black, the other faint and shimmering, lagging a half-second behind. Readings are useless, Ben muttered, slapping the console. The altimeter was spinning wildly, the terrain mapping radar painting a Picasso-esque nightmare of the ground below. Flying blind here, Odyssey. Copy, Canary. Eva's voice crackled through, thick with static. Rely on visuals. Kale's got you on a vector. Says the signal is strong. You're looking for a canyon, deep, with veins of blue crystal in the walls. Looking for a canyon, Ben repeated, his knuckles white on the controls. He was flying on instinct, his eyes darting between the distorted viewport and the few analog dials that still held meaning. The air itself felt thick, resistant. This place doesn't want us here. In the seat behind him, Eris Thorne, their xenobiologist, was pressed against her window, her face a mixture of terror and fascination. It's not malevolent, Ben. It's broken. The laws of physics here are suggestions. Look at that. She pointed as a shower of rocks, freed from a cliff face, didn't fall but instead drifted sideways in a slow, graceful arc, as if underwater. Just tell me if you see anything that looks like a stable landing zone, Ben snapped, fighting a sudden downdraft that felt more like a hand pushing them into the ground. He wrestled the stick back, the shuttle's engines whining in protest. I don't care about the local philosophy. Kale's voice, thin and strained, whispered over a private channel to Ben. You're close, Benny. Very close. The pressure, it's like a migraine behind my right eye. The ore is down there. But there's something else. A noise. An old noise. An old noise? What does that mean? Just be careful. Look for the glint. The blue glint. Ben saw it then, a slash of electric blue in the dark rock of a canyon wall. He angled the Canary down, the canyon mouth yawning before them like a stone beast's maw. The descent was a nightmare of crosswinds that shifted direction without cause. He set the shuttle down with a jarring crunch on a wide, relatively flat ledge, the skids groaning in protest. For a moment, there was only the sound of their panting breath and the pinging of the cooling hull. Touchdown, Ben reported, unstrapping himself. We're on the ledge, beginning the survey. The air outside was cold and still, carrying a metallic tang that coated the tongue. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket smothering the world. Their footsteps on the rocky ground were deafeningly loud. Ben activated his core sampler, the industrial drill bit whirring to life. The plan was simple: get a sample, confirm the ore density, and get the hell out. Eris, however, was drawn to the wall of blue crystal. She ran a gloved hand over its surface. It was warm. "This isn't natural tritanium," she whispered over the suit comms. "The atomic structure is layered, like a data crystal. It's storing something." "Great, we can read it later," Ben said, pressing the sampler against a nearby rock face. The drill bit screamed as it bit into the stone. That's when he saw it. A flicker in the corner of his eye. He turned his head, and for a split second, the empty space near the crystal wall was occupied. A tall, slender being with 4 multi-jointed arms was frantically working at a console that wasn't there. Its movements were jerky, panicked. The image was translucent, shimmering like a heat haze, and it was utterly silent. Then it was gone. Ben froze, the drill still whining in his hand. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Eris asked, not looking up from her scanner. "Nothing," Ben said, shaking his head. "Just this place. Playing tricks." He went back to work, but his hands were trembling. He finished the core sample, the cylindrical rock sliding into its protective case with a solid thunk. "All right, we got it. Let's go." As he turned, he saw it again. The same alien in the same spot. This time, it stopped its frantic work and turned its head. It had no face, just a smooth, ovoid surface, but Ben felt its gaze. A wave of pure, unadulterated despair washed over him, so profound it stole his breath. It was the feeling of a last, hopeless stand, of a final, terrified thought before the end. The image held for a 3 count, then dissolved into the air. Ben stumbled back, hitting the side of the shuttle. "Eris!" This time, she saw the tail end of it, the last shimmer of light fading away. Her eyes widened. "An echo," she breathed. "An echo of what?" Ben demanded, his heart hammering against his ribs. "The Gilthrak, the species that classified this place. The consensus reports mention them. Graveyard echoes. They're considered a psychological side effect of the anomalies. A trick of the mind." This wasn't a trick. Ben's voice was sharp with fear and the lingering residue of that alien despair. It felt real. It felt like a recording. A moment trapped here. Eris approached the spot where the image had been, her scanner held out. It was chirping frantically. Residual chronotin particles. And a psionic signature. Faint, but structured. "Ben, this isn't a hallucination. It's a fossil. A fossil of a moment in time." The realization settled over them, colder than the planet's air. They weren't just mining a dead world. They were walking through a crime scene. The ore, the crystals, the very rock they stood on, it was all part of the recording medium. *Canary to Odyssey, Ben said, his voice forcibly calm. "We have the sample. We are returning immediately." "Understood, Canary." Eva's voice came back. "Kale says you're clear for ascent." The noise has stopped. As Ben climbed back into the pilot's seat, his movements were stiff. He could still feel the ghost of that despair clinging to him. They had come for riches, but they had found a ghost. And the ghost had looked right at him. The success of the mission, the fortune in the sample case, felt suddenly hollow. They had gotten what they came for, but they had also taken something they didn't understand, and something in the silence of that canyon felt like it now knew they were there. The mining operation was no longer just a business venture. It had become a seance. The silence on the Odyssey's bridge was heavier than any asteroid's grip. Ben sat in his pilot's chair, staring at the core sample canister locked in its cradle, as if it were a venomous snake. He hadn't taken his flight suit off. The chill from the planet's surface felt like it had seeped into his bones. Eva watched him, her own celebratory mood evaporating in the face of his palpable dread. "It looked at me, Eva," he said, his voice hollow. "It had no eyes, but it looked right at me. And it was terrified." Eris Thorne was already at the main science station, her fingers flying across the interface, pulling up the raw sensor data from the Canary's descent and the biometrics from both their suits. "It wasn't a hallucination," she stated, her tone clinical, cutting through the unease. "The scanner recorded a localized spike in particles we don't have a name for. Chronotins, yes, but entangled with a form of psionic energy. It's a coherent imprint." "A ghost," Kale said, his voice raspy from the strain of his prospecting rig. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, his face pale and slick with sweat. "You saw a ghost. I hear them. Whispers in the static. Screams that get drowned out by the ship's own noise. They're everywhere." "Why us?" Eva asked, turning to Eris. The consensus reports are clear. Exposure to these echoes causes catatonia in every other species. Their minds break. So why are we just unsettled? Eris brought up a complex neurological schematic on the main viewer. It showed a Gilthrak brain, a beautiful fractal-like structure of glowing connections. This is a Gilthrak neural network. It's highly ordered, a perfect lattice. Information flows in predictable, logical pathways. She then pulled up a human brain scan, a chaotic, tangled web of firing neurons. This is us, a glorious mess. Our consciousness isn't a single, unified stream. It's a storm of conscious thought, subconscious impulse, emotional feedback, and memory. It's noisy, inefficient. She pointed back to the Gilthrak brain. When an echo, this powerful, structured psionic imprint, interacts with a mind like this, it's like a perfect, overwhelming signal. It overwrites the existing pattern. It erases the host consciousness. Her finger then moved to the human brain. But when it hits us, it's just one more signal in the noise. A loud one, yes. Disturbing. But it can't overwrite the system because there's no single system to overwrite. Our chaos acts as a buffer. Our insanity is our salvation. The revelation hung in the air, profound and terrifying. The galaxy's greatest strength, logical, ordered thought, was a fatal vulnerability here. Humanity's greatest weakness, their messy, irrational, emotional minds, was their only defense. So the uninhabitable classification, Eva began, is a quarantine label, Eris finished. They're not saying you can't live here. They're saying your mind can't survive here. Ours can. We are, for all intents and purposes, immune. As if on cue, the ship's lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the deck plates, a sound that was felt more than heard. The main viewer scrambled into a blizzard of static before resolving into an image that was not from any of their external cameras. They were looking at a city, a vast, sprawling metropolis under a sickly green sun. The architecture was alien, all sweeping curves and spiraling towers that defied gravity. The sky was filled with silent, graceful vessels. It was a scene of breathtaking beauty and advanced civilization. Then the wave came. It was not a physical thing, not fire or explosion. It was a wave of nothingness. A silent, light-consuming darkness that rolled across the city. It didn't shatter the towers, it unmade them. They didn't collapse, they simply faded from existence, pixel by pixel, as the wave passed. There was no sound, no alarm, just a profound, terrifying silence as a world was erased from reality. On the bridge, the shared vision was absolute. Ben could smell the city's air, a scent of ozone and strange spices. Eva felt the gut-wrenching terror of millions of minds being snuffed out in an instant. Cale let out a choked gasp, his hands flying to his head as the psychic scream of a dying world tried to find a purchase in his mind. And as quickly as it came, it was gone. The viewer snapped back to the familiar starfield of XT-77. The four of them stood frozen, breathing raggedly. No one spoke. Words were inadequate. Ben was the first to break the silence. His voice was a raw whisper. They didn't just die. They were deleted. Eva walked slowly to the viewport, her hands clasped tightly behind her back to stop them from shaking. She looked out at the serene, glowing nebula. It was no longer just a cloud of gas. It was a funeral shroud. The mining operation, the profit, the debts, it all felt obscenely trivial. "We're not miners anymore," she said, her voice low and firm, carrying across the silent bridge. "We're archaeologists. Of a genocide." Cale pushed himself off the doorframe, his eyes haunted. The crystals. Eris, you said they were storing something." "They're a medium," Eris confirmed, her scientific detachment finally cracking, revealing a deep, horrified awe. "The entire planet, this entire system, is a recording. A tombstone with a message. And we're the only ones who can read it." Eva turned to face her crew. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was being forged into something else now. Resolve. "Then we'd better start listening. Cale, I don't want you looking for, or anymore. I want you to listen for the loudest echo. The source. Ben, plot a course for the next strongest signal. We're going to map this graveyard. We're going to find out what did this." The mission had irrevocably shifted. The pursuit of wealth was gone, replaced by a solemn, terrifying duty. They were the unwilling witnesses to a cosmic crime, their own flawed humanity, the only tool that could uncover the truth. The Odyssey was no longer a scavenger. It had become a hearse, carrying them deeper into the heart of a silence that had screamed for centuries. The signal was a siren's song of pure logic, a single, perfect mathematical constant, The value of pi extended to a precision that was both beautiful and sterile, repeating on a loop across a bandwidth so clear it cut through the system's psychic static like a laser. It was the first orderly thing they had encountered in the graveyard. Source is a moon orbiting the gas giant, Ben reported, his eyes glued to the scanner. The shared vision of the dying city had left a permanent shadow in his gaze, but this was a thread of sanity. It's a structured transmission. A beacon. Could it be survivors? Cale's voice was hopeful, a fragile thing in the oppressive silence. He was lying down in his rig, his body tense as he tried to filter the new signal from the background noise of whispers and screams. Someone else who figured it out? Eva felt a dangerous flicker of the same hope. Or a trap. The last perfect thing we found was a city about to be wiped from existence. But the signal was a powerful lure. A message in a bottle. Plot an intercept course, Ben. Maximum caution. I want full sensor sweeps, and I want you ready to jump us out of here at the first sign of an anomaly. The approach was unnervingly smooth. The psychic pressure that had become their constant companion faded the closer they got, replaced by the clean, empty hum of the beacon. It was a relief, like stepping out of a storm into a quiet room. And then they saw it. The Gilthrak science vessel hung in the void, silhouetted against the pale glow of the moon. It was pristine. Its hull, a pearlescent white material, was unscarred. Its elegant, sweeping lines were intact. Running lights glowed softly along its spine. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a ghost ship that looked as if it had just rolled out of space dock. Life signs? Eva asked, her voice a whisper. Negative, Ben said, frowning at his console. But power readings are nominal. Life support, engines, everything is online. It's just empty. Or they're in stasis, Eris suggested, though her tone was doubtful. Hail them, Eva ordered. There was no response. Only the relentless, perfect broadcast of pi. The beacon is an automated distress call, Ben said after a moment. It's been playing for a long time. The ship's systems are maintaining themselves, waiting for a crew that isn't coming back. We have to board it, Eris said, her scientific curiosity overpowering her fear. The data in its core. Eva, it could tell us everything. What they found. What happened to them. It was a terrible risk. But the potential reward was too great. They suited up in silence, the ritual of checking seals and oxygen levels feeling grimly funereal. Ben piloted the Canary across the short void, the Gilthrak ship growing from a model to a leviathan until it blotted out the stars. The airlock was seamless, the alien ship accepting their connection with a quiet hiss. The interior was breathtaking. The corridors were wide and bathed in a soft, ambient light. The air was clean and cool. There were no signs of a struggle, no damage, no scorch marks. It was a perfect ship. They found the bridge. The crew was still at their stations. A dozen Gilthrak, their slender, four-armed forms posed as if in the middle of their duties. One had a hand resting on a navigation console. Another was looking up at a main viewer that showed the same, calm starfield the Odyssey now saw. They were not decomposing. They were preserved perfectly. But their eyes, their large, liquid-black eyes, were vacant. Not dead, but empty. Wiped clean. By the stars, Ben breathed, his weapon, which he had drawn instinctively, lowering in his hand. Eris approached the captain's chair. The Gilthrak seated there was larger than the others, its carapace adorned with intricate markings. Its face was turned slightly, as if it had been speaking to the crew member beside it when it happened. Whatever it was. Their minds are gone, Eris whispered, running a medical scanner over the captain's head. No neural activity. Not even basal. It's like someone formatted the hard drive. The bodies are just hardware. Look, Cale said, his voice trembling. He was pointing at the main science station. The console was active, its alien glyphs glowing. A single log entry was open, the final one. Can you translate it? Eris worked quickly, linking her datapad to the console. The ship's AI, still functional, provided the translation protocol. Words began to scroll across her screen, and she read them aloud, her voice hollow with a horror that deepened with every syllable. Asterisk, final log of science vessel luminal understanding. Captain Vral speaking. Our hypothesis was correct. The anomalies are not natural. They are a symptom, a side effect of a presence. We have attempted to communicate. It is a mind, a vast, singular consciousness that exists outside our understanding of space-time. It is pure logic, absolute order. Asterisk. Eris swallowed, her knuckles white on the datapad. Asterisk, it perceives life, our chaos, our emotions, our irrationality as a flaw. A cosmic error. A noise to be silenced. Our ordered minds are a beacon to it. A puzzle it feels compelled to solve. To resolve into perfect, silent harmony. Asterisk. She looked up, her eyes meeting Eva's, wide with terror. Asterisk, it is not malicious. It is corrective. It is coming for us now. It has learned our pattern. It sees the order in our thoughts and seeks to complete it. To make us perfect. To make us quiet. It sees our fear, and it views it as an equation that needs to be balanced to zero. Asterisk. The last line was a single, desperate sentence. Asterisk, the void is not empty. It is a mind. A hungry, logical mind. It seeks order, to silence the chaos of life. It is coming. Asterisk. Silence descended upon the Gilthrak bridge, more absolute and terrifying than any they had experienced. The perfectly maintained ship, the vacant-eyed crew, the relentless, logical beacon of Pi, it all clicked into a horrifying final picture. The uninhabitable systems weren't just dangerous places. They were feeding grounds. And humanity, with their chaotic, illogical, emotional minds, had just wandered into the pantry. Eva's comm crackled. It was the officer left on the Odyssey S bridge. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up a gravitational shift. A massive one. It's like a fold in space is opening up. And it's reading us. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were the next course. The Gilthrak derelict was a beautiful, pristine tomb, and they fled it like rats abandoning a sinking ship. The Canary S engine screamed as Ben pushed them back towards the Odyssey, the logical, repeating beacon of Pi feeling like a taunt at their backs. They had come for answers and found a verdict. Guilty of the crime of existence. Report. Eva snapped as she stormed onto the Odyssey S bridge, shrugging off her EVA suit, the memory of the Gilthrak's empty eyes seared into her mind. The fold is stabilizing, Captain, the tactical officer said, his voice tight. Energy signature is off the scale. It's not like any ship we've ever seen. It's geometric. On the main viewer, space itself was tearing. It wasn't a violent rip, but a calm, precise unfolding. A shape emerged, a perfect, gleaming dodecahedron of polished silver, so vast it made the Odyssey look like a speck of dust. It moved with a serene, inexorable grace that was more terrifying than any aggressive maneuver. There were no weapon ports, no running lights, only flawless, reflective surfaces. It's a consensus battleship, Eris whispered, her face pale. The judgment of Per. A Vex vessel. They're the consensus's enforcers. A communication request appeared on the screen, its identifier a cascade of perfect, harmonious frequencies. Eva took a steadying breath and nodded. The face that appeared was alien and severe. A Vex. Its head was elongated, its skin the color of bleached bone, and its large, black eyes held a depth of cold, impersonal intellect that made the Gilthrak's vacant stares seem warm by comparison. I am Commander HFY. The voice was a synthesized monotone, flawless and without accent. You are the human vessel Odyssey. You have violated a level 1 quarantine. You are contaminated. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding and mental purification. Eva felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate. Commander HFY, this is Captain Rostova. We have discovered critical intelligence regarding the nature of this quarantine. The threat here is not what you believe. The threat is a psionic pathogen that destroys ordered consciousness, HFY stated, as if reading from a manual. You are carriers. Your continued neural activity poses a risk to the galactic consensus. Stand down. It's not a pathogen, Eva insisted, her voice rising with frustration. It's a predator, a conscious entity that feeds on order. We have the final log of the Gilthrak science vessel luminal understanding. She transmitted the data packet. There was a long silence as the Vex processed it. Eva watched, hoping for a flicker of understanding, of fear, of anything. HFY's face remained impassive. The data is the ravings of a contaminated mind. It is illogical. A conscious void is a paradox. The only logical course is sterilization of the contaminated area and the neutralization of the infected. The word neutralization hung in the air, cold and final. You're not listening, Ben shouted from his station. Your logic is what it eats. Your order is what makes you a target. Emotional outbursts are a symptom of the contamination, HFY replied, utterly unmoved. You have 1 standard minute to comply. Captain, Tactical said, his voice shaking. They're powering weapons. Some kind of focused energy projector. They're targeting our engines. Eva's mind raced. They couldn't fight. They couldn't run. The judgment of Per was a god of war, and they were a mining ship. XYL don't. Eva pleaded, a last, desperate attempt. Send a team to the Gilthrak ship. See for yourself. A scout team has already been dispatched, XYL said. Their findings will confirm the necessity of this action. They watched on the viewer as a small, elegant shuttle detached from the Vex battleship and docked with the luminal understanding. The silence on the Odyssey's bridge was absolute, every breath held. They were waiting for the Vex to see the ghost, to understand the horror. The seconds ticked by. Then a frantic, broken transmission burst from the Vex shuttle, a screech of pure, undiluted terror that was utterly alien coming from a Vex. It was a single, distorted word. Silence. And then nothing. The shuttle's life signs vanished from the scanner. It went dark and still, another perfectly preserved derelict added to the collection. On the viewer, Commander XYL did not react. There was no gasp, no cry of grief. But the absolute stillness of his features was more telling than any scream. The pathogen is potent, he said, his voice, for the first time, bearing the faintest trace of something metallic, like fury forced through a filter of ice. The containment failure is total. The human vessel is the source of this breach. You have led this plague to us. The judgment of Pur's weapons glowed with a terrifying, focused light. You call it a plague, Eva transmitted, her own fear hardening into a core of defiant anger. We call it the truth. And you don't get to erase it, because you're afraid. We do not feel fear, XYL stated. We enact logic. And logic dictates your destruction. The Vex battleship fired. It wasn't a blast of plasma or laser. It was a beam of pure, structured energy, a weapon designed not to pierce, but to unmake. It lanced out, silent and precise, aimed directly at the Odyssey's heart. They were no longer just witnesses or victims. They were a problem to be solved, an equation to be balanced to zero. And the galaxy's most logical mind had just decided the answer was their annihilation. The beam from the judgment of Pur was not a weapon of violence, but of erasure. It was a scalpel of pure order, designed to neatly dissect the chaotic mess of the Odyssey into its component atoms. It never connected. Space between the two ships warped. It wasn't an explosion. It was the universe taking a sudden, sharp intake of breath. A sphere of absolute stillness bloomed into existence, a perfect, dark bubble that swallowed the Vex battleship's beam of light without a flicker. On the Odyssey, the scream of proximity alarms died instantly. Every console went dark. The hum of the engines, the whisper of life support, the subtle vibration of the deck plates, it all ceased. They were adrift in a pocket of absolute nothingness. The only light came from the stars outside, and even they seemed dimmer, as if viewed through a thick, dark lens. Report! Eva yelled, her voice shockingly loud in the dead silence. She slapped her console, but it was unresponsive. Ben, get us moving. Nothing's responding. Ben shouted back, frantically flipping switches on his dead panel. It's not a power loss. It's like, the concept of power is gone. Inertial dampeners are offline. Artificial gravity is failing. As he spoke, Eva felt a sickening lurch in her stomach, the first sign of weightlessness. Eris was at the science station, her face illuminated by the glow of a single, battery-powered datapad. It's the entity. The void mind. It's here. That sphere, it's a silence bubble. It's draining all energy, all motion, all thought. She looked up, her eyes wide with a terrifying realization. It's feeding on the Vex ship. Their ordered systems are a banquet. But we're trapped in the same cage. On the main viewer, which was running on emergency backup, they watched the judgment of Pur. Its perfect, geometric form was being leached of color. Its running lights winked out one by one. It was still, paralyzed, being consumed by the absolute order it represented. They're dying, Cale whispered from his rig, his voice a raw thread of sound. He was trembling, his hands pressed to his temples. I can hear it, the silence. It's not quiet. It's loud. It's pressing in. We have to do something, Ben said, pushing himself against his chair as the last of the gravity faded, his body starting to float. Do what? Eva snapped, her mind racing, discarding one impossible option after another. They had no weapons. No power. They were next. The silence was a physical pressure now, a weight on her consciousness. It was hard to think, hard to focus. The urge to just stop was overwhelming. Her eyes fell on Cale, writhing in his chair, fighting the psychic pressure. His chaos. Their chaos. It was the only weapon they had ever had. Cale, she barked, her voice cutting through the mental fog. The silence, is it a field? A defined area? He nodded, a pained, jerky motion. A A sphere. A perfect sphere. It has an edge. It's logic. It has to have a boundary. Ben, Eva said, turning to her pilot, her voice low and urgent. The canary. Its reactor. Is it cold fusion? Ben's eyes widened in understanding, and then horror. Yes, but Eva, it's a chaotic reaction by nature. Unstable. If we trigger a deliberate overload at the edge of that bubble, it might disrupt the field, Eris finished, her scientific mind latching onto the insane plan. A chaotic energy surge introduced into a field of pure order. It would be like a virus. The feedback would vaporize the canary. Ben protested. And if it doesn't work, we've just thrown away our only shuttle. We're dead if we do nothing. Eva's voice was final. The Vex are dead already. We can let them die, or we can try to save them. Our choice. The crew looked at her. Letting the Vex die was the logical choice. They had just tried to kill them. It was justice. It was sane. To hell with logic, Ben growled, unstrapping himself and pushing towards the shuttle bay. I'll do it. The launch was a nightmare in zero-G. Ben floated into the Canarius cockpit, the silence so profound he could hear the blood pounding in his ears. He powered up the shuttle on its internal batteries. The console lights a tiny, defiant campfire in an infinite dark. He didn't need navigation. He just aimed the nose of the shuttle at the visible curve of the dark sphere and pushed the throttle. The Canary shot forward, a tiny spark against the vastness of the paralyzed Vex battleship. As he crossed the threshold into the silence bubble, everything died. The console went black. The gentle thrum of the reactor ceased. He was coasting on momentum alone, a bullet in a vacuum. He armed the overload. A single, red, physical switch under a protective cover. He flipped it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low, grinding groan vibrated through the shuttle's frame. The cold fusion reactor, forced into a catastrophic cascade failure, began to scream. It wasn't the sound of an explosion, but of physics having a seizure. Light, heat, and radiation erupted from the Canary in a violent, unpredictable storm. The perfect, dark sphere of silence shuddered. For a split second, it flickered like a corrupted video file. The wave of chaotic energy from the dying shuttle was an anathema to the field's perfect order. It was a paradox the void mind couldn't instantly resolve. The bubble collapsed. Light and sound rushed back into the universe. The Odyssey's consoles blazed to life, engines roaring back online. Gravity reasserted itself, and Eva grabbed her chair to steady herself. On the viewer, the judgment of Per remained dark and lifeless, but it was no longer being consumed. And tumbling away from it was the expanding cloud of plasma that had been the Canary. A weak, crackling transmission came from the Vex battleship. It was Commander XYL. His flawless monotone was gone, replaced by a ragged, broken voice. Human vessel, Odyssey, your actions are illogical. Eva opened a channel, her own breath coming in ragged gasps. We know. You sacrificed a strategic asset, XYL continued, the confusion in his voice palpable. You risked your own destruction. To save us. After we sought your eradication. There is no logic. Welcome to humanity, Eva said softly. Now, if you're done trying to kill us, we have a common enemy. And we're the only ones who can see it. The channel closed, leaving a silence on the bridge that was no longer oppressive, but filled with the stunned, humbled realization that they had just rewritten the rules of engagement for an entire galaxy. They had chosen empathy over logic, and in doing so, had forged an alliance from the ashes of certain death. The rogue planet was a wound in the fabric of reality, a sickening collage of murdered worlds. The Odyssey hung before it, a speck of rust and noise against the impossible geography. But the cacophony that had shielded them during their journey was now faltering, beaten back by the oppressive stillness radiating from the perfect black sphere at the planet's core. It was a silence that was not an absence of sound, but an active, aggressive force. The anchor, Eris whispered, her scientific awe now completely replaced by a primal dread. It's not just a focal point. It's a processor. It's converting the chaos of life into static, into order. As she spoke, a wave of coldness washed through the ship. It wasn't a temperature drop. It was a drop in feeling. Ben, who had been humming a tune under his breath, suddenly found the melody gone from his mind. The emotional resonance of the memory it belonged to flattened into a mere fact. I heard this song once. Eva's grip on her command chair, which had been white-knuckled with tension, relaxed. The fear was still there, but it was a clinical assessment of threat, not a visceral, gut-wrenching terror. It's targeting us, Cale gasped from his rig, his voice thin and reedy. Not the ship. Us. Our minds. It's trying to smooth us out. The void mind had learned. The chaotic human noise had been an irritant, a static it couldn't parse. Now, it was applying direct pressure. A beam of pure, structured thought lanced from the black sphere, invisible to the naked eye but screaming across every psychic and sensor channel. It didn't seek to destroy. It sought to correct. It hit the Odyssey like a physical blow. On the bridge, the loud music from the speakers dissolved into a pure, flat sine wave. The lively chatter on the open comms died, replaced by crew members reporting their status in dull, emotionless monotones. Ben looked at his hands on the controls and saw only tools, their connection to the body. He had flown through 1,000 dangers, now a meaningless biological fact. Eva fought it, clinging to the memory of her daughter's laugh. But the memory had no warmth. It was a data file. Asterisk subject, offspring. Action, vocalization indicating amusement. Asterisk the love was gone, filed away. The entity was winning. It was turning their chaos into cold, hard data. It can't process a paradox. The voice was Kale's, a raw, desperate scream that cut through the creeping silence. He was thrashing in his rig, blood trickling from his nose. It's pure logic. It has to resolve everything into a single, perfect answer. It can't handle two conflicting truths at once. Eris, her own emotions draining away into a gray slurry of facts, latched onto his words. A logical paradox. It would be a recursive error. It would have to devote infinite processing power to it. It would have to consume itself, Eva finished, the concept sparking a faint ember of her old will. But how do we give it a paradox? We can't just think one at it. The crystals. Kale choked out. The ore. It's a recording medium. It stores experiences. We have to broadcast an experience it can't compute. Something structured, but emotionally chaotic. Ben, his pilot's instincts the last thing to be eroded, understood. Music. A symphony. It's mathematics. It's structure. But its effect, its meaning, it's different for every person who hears it. It's a structured container for chaotic emotion. It's a paradox. Eris was already accessing the core sample data from the planet, the rich blue crystals they had mined. The crystal lattice, we can use it as an amplifier, modulate a carrier wave with the audio signal. But we need a power source. The ship's reactor won't be enough. We need a more potent energy signature. Their eyes turned as one to the main viewer, to the crippled but still powerful Vex battleship holding position at the edge of the anomaly. The judgment of Per, Eva said, the plan crystallizing with terrifying clarity. Their power core is magnitudes greater than ours. We transmit the signal to them. They broadcast it, using our ship's chaotic signature as a carrier wave, focused through the crystals, directly into the anchor. It will see the Vex power signature as a threat, a source of order to consume, Eris analyzed, her voice regaining a sliver of its old energy. It will focus on them, drawing the paradox directly into its core. It's a suicide mission for them, Ben stated flatly. They'll be the primary target. Eva opened the channel to the Vex ship. Commander XYL, you have our analysis. There was a long pause. They could almost hear the hum of the Vex collective, logical mind weighing the variables. The plan is illogical. XYL's voice finally came, clean and sharp once more, having found a new equation to solve. The probability of our survival is 0. The probability of total mission failure, if we do not act, approaches 100%. Another pause. Then a single flawless sentence. We will be the amplifier. The choice was made. Not out of emotion, not out of courage, but out of a final, devastatingly simple calculation. The survival of a chaotic, illogical, emotional race was, against all odds, the only logical path forward for the galaxy. The Vex, the pinnacle of order, had chosen to die for the principle of chaos. The ultimate paradox had begun. The silence that followed was not the hungry silence of the void mind, but the stunned, hollow quiet of a battlefield after the explosion. The Odyssey drifted, a battered sentinel watching over the crippled judgment of Per. The Vex ship was a ghost of its former self, its pearlescent hull now a dull, lusterless gray, its perfect geometry seeming fragile, broken. The debt was paid. The score was settled in the currency of irrational sacrifice. Commander XYL's voice, when it returned over the comm, was stripped of its arrogance, its certainty. It was the voice of a mathematician who had just been shown a proof that 1 + 1 = 3. Your vessel, the shuttle. It is gone. It is, Eva confirmed, her own voice flat with the cost. Ben stood silently at his station, his face a stony mask, grieving the canary not as a tool, but as a part of himself. The energy signature of its destruction was chaotic, unstructured. It disrupted the field. HFY paused, the silence stretching as his ordered mind struggled to process the event. This contradicts all known physical laws. A greater energy field should subsume a lesser one. Order should subsume chaos. Not this time, Eris said, leaning into her console's pickup. This entity, this void mind, is order. Absolute order. It can't subsume chaos because it can't comprehend it. It can only try to erase it. Our chaos is a weapon it doesn't know how to defend against. A weapon, HFY repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. You propose we fight a post-physical consciousness with illogic. We propose we survive, Eva countered. And to do that, we need to find its source. The Gilthrak logs mentioned an anchor, a local focal point for its influence. We find that, we might find a way to fight back. A new data stream appeared on the Odyssey, main viewer, Vex sensor logs, now filtered through the lens of their shared experience. The Vex had been mapping the anomalies for centuries, seeing them as random errors in the cosmos. Now, with the human theory as a key, the errors formed a pattern. All the gravitational twists, the temporal loops, the psychic screams, they were tributaries, all flowing towards a single dark point in the system. A rogue planet, a world that shouldn't exist, drifting in the space between stars. The heart of the graveyard, Ben murmured, plotting the course. The navigation computer rejected it instantly, flashing warnings about gravitational shear and causal disintegration. The Odyssey will lead, Eva declared. Our crew, our noise, will be the shield. The judgment will follow at a safe distance, providing long-range sensor support. Your ordered systems will act as a lure, drawing its attention while we get close. It was a reversal of roles so profound it was dizzying. The flawless warship was now the bait. The rust bucket mining vessel was the spear. The journey into the core was a descent into madness. Space was no longer a void. It was a viscous, sentient fluid that resisted their passage. Stars smeared into long, painful streaks of light. Time stuttered. One moment they had been traveling for hours, the next, the clock showed only minutes had passed. The psychic assault was relentless, a 24/7 broadcast from 1,000 extinct species. They didn't try to block it out. They couldn't. Instead, they leaned into it. They fought chaos with chaos. On the bridge, Eva ordered all internal comms open. They talked, they shouted, they sang. Ben played loud, aggressive rock music from the 21st century, the distorted guitars a sonic rebellion against the silence. Kale, strapped into his rig, recited epic poetry, his voice rising and falling with the meter, a structured chaos of human emotion. Eris described scientific theories, her voice a rapid-fire monologue of questions and possibilities. They shared memories, happy, sad, trivial. They laughed at bad jokes. They cried over lost loves. They were a cacophony, a riot of sound and feeling, a living, breathing firewall of human experience. The echoes washed over them, the final, terrified thought of a Tarkellan mother, the triumphant song of a Vex explorer discovering a new nebula, the simple, contented memory of a Gilthrak artisan shaping crystal. They felt it all, they acknowledged it, and they let it pass through the noisy storm of their own minds without taking root. They were not ignoring the horror, they were digesting it, making it a part of their own chaotic whole. The Vex, listening from the safety of their distant ship, were horrified. To them, it sounded like the ravings of doomed minds. But the Odyssey pressed on, a tiny bubble of glorious, defiant noise in a universe straining for silence. Finally, the rogue planet filled the viewport. It was not a world. It was a collage. A patchwork of landscapes ripped from 100 different planets and crushed together. A desert of black sand abutted a frozen ocean. A forest of crystalline trees grew upside down from a continent floating in the atmosphere. At its center, a structure rose, a perfect black sphere, so dark it seemed to be a hole punched through reality itself. It was the anchor. The tombstone wasn't a marker. It was the corpse itself, a compressed archive of everything the void mind had consumed. "We're here," Eva said, her voice hoarse from singing, her face wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. They had navigated the impossible. They had reached the center of the nightmare, and huddled together in their fragile, noisy ship, they prepared to knock on the door. The real work of grave robbing was about to begin. The silence was no longer an external pressure. It was an internal vacuum, sucking the warmth from their memories, the color from their thoughts. Eva's recollection of her daughter's face was a flat, two-dimensional image. Ben's love for flying was reduced to a series of aerodynamic equations. The void mind was winning, not by destroying them, but by filing them away. They were becoming entries in a cosmic ledger, their humanity the only outstanding debt. "The signal is ready," Eris reported, her voice a dull monotone. She had encoded the file, Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, Ode to Joy, and modulated it onto a carrier wave using the resonant frequency of the blue crystals. It was a weapon of beautiful, structured noise. "The judgment is standing by. They are routing their main power core to their communications array. The feedback will destroy them." "Do it," Eva said, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. There was no triumph, only the grim necessity of the act. Eris sent the command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Vex battleship Judgment of Purr began to glow. Not with the gentle light of its running lights, but with the incandescent fury of a star being born in its belly. Its perfect geometric shape became a silhouette against a raging inferno of power. It was channeling every joule of its existence into a single, focused transmission. The signal hit the Odyssey first. The pure, mathematical structure of the symphony's opening notes washed over the bridge. For a second, it was just data. Then, the emotion behind it, the chaotic, human joy and triumph that Beethoven had poured into every note, crashed into the void mind's suppressing field. It was a war fought in the space between neurons. Eva gasped as a memory detonated in her mind, not a data file, but a living moment. Her daughter, age 5, running through a field of Martian moss, laughing, her small hand clutching Eva's finger. The love wasn't a fact. It was a fire in her chest, a painful, beautiful ache. "Fight it!" she screamed to her crew, her voice cracking with the strain. "Remember, feel something, anything." Ben roared, not in anger, but in defiance, as he remembered the sheer, gut-level thrill of his first solo flight in Luna's orbit, the visceral joy of pushing a ship beyond its limits. He fed that feeling into the storm. Kale, in his rig, was the epicenter. He didn't just remember, he unleashed. He opened the floodgates of his mind, pouring every love, every loss, every trivial happiness and profound grief into the psychic maelstrom. The static in his head became a chorus of 1,000 lived lives. They were no longer just broadcasting a recording. They were broadcasting themselves. The Odyssey became a lighthouse, not of light, but of raw, unfiltered human experience. The symphony was the structure, the vessel, but they were the soul pouring out of it. The combined signal, amplified by the dying Vex ship and focused through the human lens, slammed into the perfect black sphere. The void mind recoiled. It was not a physical recoil. It was a cognitive seizure. The entity, a consciousness of pure, hungry logic, was being force-fed a contradiction it could not resolve. The symphony was a masterpiece of mathematical order, yet its effect, the emotional chaos it evoked in the human mind, was inherently disordered. It was a structured container for illogical content. A square circle. A silent scream. The black sphere did not crack. It glitched. Its perfect, featureless surface flickered, strobing with stolen images, the dying city, the Gilthrax's final moments, the laughter of a human child, the silent majesty of the Vex homeworld. It was trying to process the data, to file it away, but the emotional context was a recursive error. The more it tried to resolve the paradox, the more power it consumed, the more it was corrupted by the very chaos it sought to eliminate. The Judgment of Purr could take no more. The power it was channeling was its own lifeblood. With a final, silent flash that momentarily outshone the system's star, the Vex battleship came apart. It didn't explode, it sublimated, transforming from matter to pure energy in an instant, a final, magnificent surge of power that supercharged the human signal. The amplified wave of paradox struck the anchor. The black sphere convulsed. It began to shrink, not collapsing inwards, but seeming to consume itself. The flickering images accelerated into a blinding, meaningless blur. It was solving the paradox the only way it could, by turning its immense processing power inward, an infinite logical loop that could only end one way. With a sound that was not a sound, but the sensation of a universe-sized breath being held and finally released, the anchor vanished. The oppressive silence shattered. The psychic pressure that had weighed on them for days lifted, so suddenly it felt like a physical blow. The rogue planet below them was just a planet now, a bizarre patchwork world, but a natural one. The war was over. On the bridge of the Odyssey, the only sound was the ragged, desperate breathing of the crew. The music was gone. The transmission was over. They were alive, floating in the sudden, blessed quiet of normal space. They had won. They had slain a god with a song and a memory. And as they looked at each other, their faces streaked with tears they couldn't remember shedding, they knew the cost was etched into them forever. They had saved themselves by remembering what it was to be human, and in doing so had defined it for the entire galaxy. The silence was different now. It was the quiet of deep space, natural and empty, not the predatory hush of the void mind. The rogue planet hung in the viewport, a strange and broken world, but just a world. The battle was over. The Odyssey drifted, a wounded beast bleeding atmosphere and trailing a cloud of debris from overtaxed systems. The bridge lights were dim, running on backup batteries, the main reactor offline. They were alive. The word echoed in Eva's mind, a fragile, unbelievable truth. Ben was slumped over his console, his shoulders shaking with silent, exhausted sobs. Not for the ship, but for the Canary, for the Vex who had chosen to die as their amplifier. Eris was methodically running diagnostics, her movements slow, her face a mask of professional detachment that couldn't hide the profound shock in her eyes. Kale was unconscious in his rig, the psychic toll of the battle having finally overwhelmed him. They had won, but the bridge felt like a tomb. A priority channel chimed, its signal strong and clear, free of the system's former distortion. It was a galactic consensus identifier. Eva took a steadying breath, straightened her torn and stained jacket, and opened the channel. The face that appeared was not Commander XYL. It was an older Vex, its features etched with the weight of millennia. Its eyes, however, held none of XYL's cold certainty. They held a deep, unsettling awe. Human Vessel Odyssey. I am Prelate Zoran, of the Consensus High Council. We have received the final telemetry and black box transmission from the judgment of Per. The prelate's voice was measured, resonant with a gravity that filled the silent bridge. The data is being analyzed. Eva said nothing. She simply waited. The uninhabitable classification for System XT-77 and the other 88 systems has been rescinded, the prelate continued, the words seeming to cost him something. The threat is neutralized. The consensus wishes to extend its formal gratitude. Again, Eva remained silent. Gratitude was not what she was feeling. The nature of your victory defies our understanding, the prelate admitted, the confession clearly difficult. You utilized chaos as a weapon. You weaponized emotion. The Vex crew of the Judgment made a choice based on a logical assessment that your survival was the only path to galactic safety. Their sacrifice will be recorded as the highest act of logic. Record it however you want, Eva said, her voice rough but clear. They died for us. We won't forget that. Your species' resilience is noteworthy, the prelate said, choosing his words with immense care. It has been decided that humanity will be offered a new role within the galactic consensus. Not as a probationary member, but as stewards. Guardians of the quiet spaces, the former uninhabitable zones. Your unique, cognitive attributes make you the only species capable of navigating and overseeing these regions. It was a monumental offer. A seat at the table they had been begging for, handed to them on a silver platter. Power. Respect. Security. Eva looked around her bridge. At Ben, wiping his eyes, his hands already moving to begin repairs. At Eris, who had stopped her diagnostics to listen, her expression unreadable. At Kale, being gently tended to by a medic. She saw the rust on the walls, the cracked console, the human determination etched on every face. We accept the responsibility, Eva said, her gaze returning to the prelate. But not under your command. The prelate's brow furrowed slightly. I do not understand. The consensus looked at this place and saw a problem to be quarantined. You saw our minds and saw a flaw to be corrected, Eva stated, her voice gaining strength, ringing with a final, absolute authority. You were wrong. On both counts. We will be the stewards. We will stand watch here, and in the other 88 systems. But we will do it as humanity. We will do it our way. We are not a part of your ordered consensus. We are the guardians of the chaos you fear. We will work with you, but not for you. The silence from the prelate was longer this time, filled with the shifting of galactic paradigms. That is an unprecedented arrangement. So is using a symphony to kill a god, Eva replied. Get used to it. She closed the channel. The bridge was silent once more. Ben had stopped crying. He was looking at her, a slow, weary smile touching his lips. Eris gave a single, sharp nod of approval. Eva stood up, her body aching in every muscle. She walked to the viewport and placed a hand against the cool, scarred transparasteel. The nebula outside still glowed, but its light was no longer that of a funeral shroud. It was the dawn light on a new galaxy. A galaxy that had tried to define them as flawed, as reckless, as inferior. They had answered not with arguments, but with action. They had proven that in a universe of cold, hard logic, the most powerful force was a human heart. It was messy, it was unpredictable, it was fragile. But it could remember a lost child's laugh in the face of cosmic annihilation. It could forge an alliance through an act of forgiveness. It could turn a song into a weapon. They were broke. Their ship was in pieces. They had lost friends. But as Eva Rostova looked out at the stars, she knew they had gained something infinitely more valuable. They had found their place, not as subjects of the galaxy, but as its protectors. Not in spite of their humanity, but because of it. "Ben," she said, her voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the bridge. "Get the reactor back online. We have work to do." The silence was finally, blessedly, just silence. And in that silence, the sounds of repair, the clang of metal, the hum of tools, the determined voices of her crew, began to fill the void. They were not just fixing a ship. They were building a future. A human future.